wanting to know how to start to save your marriage? My name is Lee Balk, and I'm here to give you some beginning points on how to start saving your marriage right now. Now, the first question you're going to have to ask is, should you even save your marriage? That's a core piece you have to answer if you're going to move forward. That's pretty easy because you see 100% of marriages have problems, but only 50% survive the problems. Divorce does not end relationships and often only complicates them, and that's why I say that really the question of should you save your marriage is pretty easily answered. Divorces really don't end relationships, especially if there are kids involved. You have to stay connected, and often couples stay connected emotionally, even sexually, after they divorce, in which case they haven't really divorced. Divorces also remove all security that children understand. It is not without consequences. There has been some research a while back that showed that kids were not affected by divorce. All of that research has been disproven. Every research study shows that kids are greatly affected by divorce. It's not that they will not be destroyed by it, but they are affected. And if we can minimize that, that's an important thing to do. So I guess what I'm saying is you probably should save your marriage with only one exception. I am not for saving abusive marriages. And I'm talking about emotional and verbal and physical abuse. I'm not talking about the, he accidentally pushed me, or he said a bad word to me, or she cussed at me, those kinds of things that are the exceptions, not the rules to your communication. An abusive marriage is an ongoing pattern of injury, whether it's emotional or physical, and that is dangerous. Abusive relationships often escalate, and that's why I leave that as the exception. If you're in an abusive relationship, you need to take care of yourself and make sure you're safe before you ever worry about what do you do about the marriage. In fact, most of the time those marriages need to be ended just to keep everybody safe. With that said, I do believe that most people should work to save their marriage. Which brings the question, okay, so you want to save your marriage, where do you start? You start with yourself. You have to stop panicking, stop begging, stop arguing, and calm down. The panicking, the begging, the arguing only escalate the situation and propel the other person into believing that there is no other option other than to get out of this relationship. So you have to calm down. You have to begin to use the top part of your brain, the neocortex area of your brain, not the bottom part of your brain that's all about fear and survival. You have to find some ways of backing off, not begging the other person to stay, offering for them to stay, inviting them to stay, and not arguing with them, because all you're doing when you're arguing is pushing them back into the corner where they're more and more convinced that they are correct and you are wrong. So what do you do now? Realize this is not an overnight project. Marriages don't get into trouble overnight, and they don't heal overnight, and this will take time and effort. If you're thinking, well, I want a secret that's going to save my marriage in the next 24 hours, it's not going to happen. If you see somebody who's trying to tell you that they have the way to save your marriage in just a short amount of time, I don't mean that they say they can help you get started in a short amount of time, but they say they can actually save your marriage in no time at all, whether it's by giving them a hex or by manipulating them or tricking them. Do not believe it. It takes time and it takes effort and it takes dedication in order for you to stay on track and get that marriage saved. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to write down your spouse's complaints. I know you've probably heard plenty of that, so make a list of the complaints your spouse has made for the last few years. Now, with an open mind, what truth is there to these complaints? Which ones are they? Maybe it's not that they are completely correct about it, but maybe they're somewhat correct about it. Maybe they've said you're always critical, and the fact is you have become more critical of them, wanting them to be a better person or wanting them to change, but somehow you become more critical of them. You need to be open with that. You need to be willing to accept that and willing to make some changes. And then commit yourself to making those changes. Don't just write this list down. This is an active list. You have to work to change what is not working in your life so that you can be a better person and so that you can save the marriage. Now, you're going to raise a question. Well, that's not fair. I have complaints about them too. You're right. It's not fair. But by now you may be wondering whether fair even counts at all. I'm not worried about fair, but about saving the marriage. Now, let's face it. Right now, immediately, you're going to be treating only the symptoms of the real issue. The real issue is much deeper than this. But right now, you need to treat the symptoms. It's kind of like if you have cut your arm, you need to stop the bleeding before you figure out what caused you to cut your arm. That's a secondary question. While you're bleeding, you need to stop the bleeding. You need to treat the immediate injury and then figure out what's going on. So that's the starting point, and if you want to know more about how to deal with the real issues that are behind a marriage, go now to www.savethemarriage.com. That's www.savethemarriage.com.